have all of our kinks worked out for the next time, though. I promise it'll be better.
I promise I'll be there the day before, even if I sleep over. Patty Gary smiling. Hey, just don't nudge.
We should have all of our kinks worked out for the next time, though. Go. There's.
I promise I'll be there the day before, even if I sleep over.
Okay, let me get.
Gary smiling. Hey, just don't nudge.
Okay, now let me get my. Where's it? Okay, now let me get my. Kill that. Where's it? There it is. There we go. Now that's going to play in the background. Let me get the. Got that over on my other screen. One more thing, and we are rocking and rolling. Window, Facebook. And if you have a way, folks, I will post it on in the chat real quick. Could not overcome Facebook live on YouTube. All right. There it is. So it's on Facebook that we're live on YouTube. I'm going to put in the chat so that you can look at that. And if you care to give it a shot, the link is there and you can copy it over to any Facebook page or anything else. Let people know the link. All right, folks, this is it. Put on your best face. And Gary, give us a couple of seconds of silence and then rock and roll, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Constitutionally Correct Vision 2020. This episode is going to start the debate between the presidential candidates for the Constitution Party. I am Gary Welch, the co-host of Constitutionally Correct, and I am joined by Randy Stufflebeam and our prestigious candidates. Randy?
Well, thank you, Gary. A whole lot. Great to have you here. And we are excited about this debate tonight. We have 5 mighty fine candidates. And if you've been looking at any of the debates over the past, 6 months, including, the open debates, you'll find none more professional and more succinct on the issues than this group of candidates that we are going to be putting to the test, grilling them, as it were. We're not going to put them on the Barbie, but we are going to find out how they stand on the issues. And so tonight we have Samm Tittle, who has run for president a couple of times before. She's really getting her name out there from the East Coast. And we've got Don Blankenship from, now I'm going to say this, I'm pretty sure I've got this right. Samm Tittle and Don Blankenship both are from West Virginia. We have Charles Kraut with us tonight, who is they're from the state of Virginia. We have Dan Cummings, who is got transported from the state of Wyoming. He's now living in Utah. And last but not least, Don Grundmann. And we are excited to have these candidates with us tonight. Each candidate will give an opportunity to give a 2-minute opening statement, and then we'll come back to Gary to open the first round of questioning, and each candidate will get 2 minutes. There'll be a round of rebuttals if the candidates wish to use that opportunity, and they'll each have a minute. And then there'll be a second round of rebuttal for that particular question, which will be 30 seconds. And so I've got a randomizer. It won't be in the same order. it won't be the same starting person. And so I'm clicking my randomizer, and this will be the order for this opportunity to give your opening statements. And so please try to remember your order so I don't have to cut in here. You get Samm Tittle is number 1. Number 2, Don Grundmann. Number 3 is Dan Cummings. Number 4 is Charles Kraut. And number 5 is Dan Blankenship for this particular round. That'll change come the next opportunity to ask or answer the questions. So we will start with Samm Tittle tonight, giving her opening statement. And you have 2 minutes, Samm.
Hey, good evening, my fellow Americans. Here you are in the Constitution Party, the only party available to you. There is no more Republican Party, no more Democrat Party. It's one party of sludge. My name is Samm Tittle. You'll find me at samm2020.com. I am born El Paso, Texas. I reside in Virginia, and I am now in Idaho Falls, Idaho, where I'll be spending all the time right on up to the end until the election of the primary. We've been out there. We are finding out that the Constitution Party is respected. They've been looking for something other than what they've got up in the White House. So we've got a pretty good shot at winning in this election. And it will be the Constitution Party. All of the distinguished people in this debate will have their opportunity, and we're on the streets, folks. One last thing, I am your Second Amendment enforcer, and I can't be prouder than to hold that title. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next one up, Don Grundmann. Oh, hold on. Let me get your, I got to remember I'm on the controls. So Don, you're up. We need to make sure you're unmuted. I'm not, I don't have, where's the control to unmute you? 1 second. It wasn't anticipating having this kind of a problem. Okay, go ahead, Don.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Gary and Randy, for this excellent opportunity to speak to everyone. I'm Don Grundmann. I'm a doctor of chiropractic by profession. I'm the chairman of the Constitution Party in California, and I'm seeking the presidential nomination of the Constitution Party since I believe that the CP has an opportunity which is only given to it. Unfortunately, the major parties, the Democrats and Republicans, are compromised, to put it mildly. They've compromised our Constitution. It's a foreign idea to them, and they just run roughshod. Many years ago, there was a member of the Democratic Party who said that the Constitution was like an old blue dress. You bring it out for special occasions, and otherwise you forget about it. And I would say that the Constitution is even more forgotten now by the two major parties. But the Constitution Party itself has an opportunity to do what those parties cannot and will not do, in the sense that we can bring to the people the need for fiscal integrity to the government, which is a forgotten concept. And we can also especially save our culture. And I bring up the culture idea that we can do what those parties refuse to do. We can challenge cultural objectives which are meant to destroy our nation. And we can raise the cultural standards of our nation. And specifically, one of the many ideas that we can do is we can promote what I refer to as science and sanity, such as there are only two genders. There are no more. There's not 354 or 103. And we also stand for science, true science. True science saying that a fraud like global warming, climate change does not exist. It's a giant scam which is intended to enslave the people as compared to free them. It does nothing to so-called save the earth, but it does save the plantation masters who I believe are taking
15
control
seconds.
of our republic. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and please, I ask for your consideration. And my website is fightthepower.org with dashes between the words fight-the-power.org. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. I got to just. All right. Next up is Dan Cummings. Let me get your video highlighted here. All right, go.
My name is Daniel Cummings. I'm seeking the presidency of the United States through the Constitution Party. I have I'm in my 60th year of intensive Constitution study. I know the Constitution thoroughly, along with its history, the history of the founders, the character of the founders. And I believe that I have the best constitutional instincts of anybody that I know. I am quick to understand and analyze problems and challenges to our Constitution. I favor the Constitution Party because the two major parties are in total constitutional apostasy. They give us constitutional heresies, excuses that have no relationship to the Constitution or to individual freedom. They have become oppressive, socialist, fascist, and control freak police state. And it's my mission to reverse that and to lead us back to the Constitution, to restore the Constitution, not to save it because it's pretty well done as it is. We must restore and return.
30 seconds.
I understand where we lost our way. I understand why. The seductive appeal of socialism to the people. And I know the way back.
15.
I recognize the counterfeits and the side paths. I know how to stay on the trail. Thank you. I appreciate your support.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Charles Kraut, you're next up. Let me spotlight your video. Go ahead.
Tonight, and thank you for hosting it, Randy and Gary. I'm Kraut. I've been a member of the Constitution Party for about a dozen years now. And when I got involved with the Constitution Party, Howard Phillips asked me what I was going to do to help make this party more successful. Since then, back in 2008, I have done a lot of research. I've read more than 150 books and thousands of articles because I'm an analyst by training and inclination. I want to know why things happen. I want to know why our country has moved away from the Constitution. My research has clearly demonstrated to me exactly what happened, and now I'm beginning to understand why it happened. And with that information, I'm able to formulate a politically acceptable plan to bring America back to the Constitution, because there's no political will to do the things that really need to be done to restore our Constitution today. That needs to change. The only way it's going to change is if the American people get involved. What I have discovered is that progressivism has taken over most of our lives. Progressivism is responsible for the welfare state, for most of the bureaucracy we struggle through today, for world wars, for genocide, for all sorts of major problems that we face. We can combat it, but we have to know more about what it is. One of the things that Americans do not understand is that this is not a democracy. Most of our congressmen and
30.
senators and presidents and such have never read their job description. Otherwise, they would know that they are serving in a constitutional republic. That distinction is extremely important. I've written 2 books on the subject. If you'd like more information, please go to my website, cwk2020.com. Thank you.
All right. Don Blankenship, highlighting your video, and go ahead.
Yes, I'm Don Blankenship, and if you want to read about me, you can go to donblankenship.com. Like all the other candidates, I'm greatly concerned about the fact that we've abandoned the Constitution and abandoned the rule of law. Probably the most publicized violation of the rule of law is the sanctuary cities and illegal immigration that has taken over the country, so to speak. But the problem we have with laws is that most of the laws are coming out of the judicial system, what they call common law. And in fact, the laws are inconsistent all across the country. Most Americans don't experience it, but each of the circuits of the federal court have different laws for the same thing. It's frustrating, for example, that something as simple as defining reasonable doubt is different depending on what district of the country you're in. As far as the Constitution, one of the biggest violations of the Constitution that's occurred in my lifetime was Sullivan versus New York Times, where the government can now declare you to be a public figure, and the you don't have equal rights or equal protection from defamation and slander. That one change, which allows the government and the media to slander public figures that are, if you will, anti-establishment or trying to make a difference in the country, basically nullifies free speech and makes it very difficult for individuals or even for parties like the Constitution Party to
30.
advance as they have the right to do. The bottom line is that I believe that the first goal has to be to make the Constitution Party relevant, because there are opportunities. Both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are in disarray. The Republican
15.
Party will be even more so when Trump's term ends. So it's really important that we get our act together and begin to represent ourselves so that we can take that third party position.
All right. Thank you very much. Folks, I hope that you're out there, and if you can hear, please, by all means, share the link. We just couldn't get a connection on Facebook, but we're doing good here on Facebook or on YouTube Live. So share the link out there, get it up to all of your friends, invite them for a watch party or however you want to do it. But feel free to join us. And if you get on the thing, we'll possibly consider a question that you may have and want to hear an answer to for our candidates. So at this time, we are going to move over and begin the first round of questions with Gary Welch being my co-host for quite a little while now, and really appreciate all that he's doing on behalf of moving the Constitution back into our country. Welcome back, Gary, and got your video spotlighted. Go ahead and start your round of questioning.
Okay, so the first debate is about the Constitution, but this is not like a College 101 exam about the Constitution. Is how do you define your role as the executive within the Constitution? So the questions will be more directed towards that. So I'm going to start off my question by actually sharing a slide with you so you can see this. These are the current departments that are under the president right now. There are 15 of them, and what you are looking at is $1 trillion every year being spent on these departments. So my question, and Randy, go ahead and start the randomizer right now.
Got it.
My question is, as president of the United States, we're going to assume that you want to eliminate most, or if not all of them. My question would be, which ones do you eliminate, and how would you go about doing that? And you don't have to go into detail, just give us a brief overview of how you plan on eliminating these alphabet organizations.
All right, I have randomized, and first up is Charles Kraut. I've just highlighted your video. You got 2 minutes.
Thank you. The first most important department to eliminate would be the Department of Education. It would also be the easiest to eliminate. Of course, the Constitution is silent on the issue of public education, and both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson commented at some length about the need for public education, but realized that there was no appropriate way to insert it into the Constitution, since it should be the province of local and perhaps state governments. We need to return control of our public schools to the people, the parents of the United States. We need to let them determine the things that their children will be taught, particularly in light of the fact that our public schools in large part are being used as indoctrination camps for all sorts of things that they should not. They are taught sex education as early as kindergarten. They are taught gender confusion. They are taught immorality. They're taught drug abuse. They are taught all sorts of things that are just not right and should not. And the things that they are being taught have taken the place of the really important things like the math, the science, the real history, as opposed to the fake history, and even things like cursive writing. So we need to do that because, as Washington said, the most important thing we can teach our children is the science of government. There's nothing more important in a constitutional republic such as ours. So eliminating that department is fairly straightforward because only 8% of a local school district's funding comes from the federal government. So they can replace that income relatively
30.
easy. And I encourage, and I have been working in this area to encourage parents and grandparents as appropriate to get involved in the education of their children so that we can begin this takeover. But it takes educated parents, educated
15.
teachers, and people who are properly inclined to uphold and defend the Constitution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next is Don Grundmann, and I will have your video highlighted here in a second. Okay, go ahead, Don.
Charles mentioned several things which are quite correct. The Department of Education is a very basic thing to eliminate. I believe we also have to recognize that in the miseducation of our nation, that has allowed many things to occur, such as getting rid of the Department of Education and trying to return control to the parents for the education of their children. And even to the states will be extremely difficult because there's a bureaucratic structure, which we know as the teachers' unions. And I believe that individual teachers, singular teachers, do whatever they can to whatever they possibly can to give the students the greatest education that they can. But that's in direct opposition to the teachers' unions, which I believe essentially don't give a damn about the education of the children at all. They're far more interested in their bureaucratic and political power. So in order to save education, to get rid of the Department of Education, as a chief executive, I would certainly do everything in my power to hammer that home. And with recognition that we're fighting a cultural war too, where we're fighting the power structure of the school bureaucracy and the teachers unions, which are essentially fighting to keep down the education of the children. In the other aspects of our budget, there's a fantastic amount to cover, and I've forgotten the proper name of the law. Essentially, now we have, I believe it's zero-based budgeting, that every year we should start out with only what we need. And instead of running out right now, at the end of the fiscal year, many departments, if they have excess cash, they'll just spend it for whatever they possibly
30.
can, and to avoid giving it back to the government because it lowers their future budget. We have to reverse that and have a completely different accounting system to save the proper money from our government, because we can't do this eventually. We're going to go bust. And it doesn't seem like it now in a time of what we consider prosperity, but all this will fade and be blown to pieces if we continue excess spending.
Okay, thank you. The next one is Don Blankenship, highlighting your video now. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I think that it's generally the opinion of most all the candidates that the Department of Education needs to be eliminated. I think also the Department of Defense is easy to eliminate. I was in the energy business for most of my life and oversaw the production of more energy in southern West Virginia, East Kentucky, Virginia than anybody in history, and I never met anybody from the Department of Energy. They were formed, when we had the hostages in Iran, essentially, and I haven't seen them serve the purpose, but private industry has managed to make us nearly, independent on our oil use. So, but within these departments, I think the thing that doesn't want to be missed within the departments that you listed there are sometimes 10 sub-departments, so to speak. And there's a lot of those departments that can be eliminated, and a lot of these agencies that appear to be, if you will, necessary can be cut in half. So there's a great deal of research and analysis, as Charles talks about, a lot of detail that needs to be sorted out. But certainly the Department of Education and the Department of Energy could be eliminated quite easily.
Okay, thank you. Samm Tittle, 1 second. Okay, go ahead, Sam.
All right. The first thing we better look at is we're talking about that Department of Education. I want to reorganize it. We don't want to do away with the department that's already got a lot of running room. Although we don't need 255,000 employees in there. I've got the solution for that, and it goes right under the President and Vice President of the United States of America. We'll get education back into its place in the United States of America, because we got some major problems with the kids that are on in this society right now. Right on back down to their simple manners, moral scruples. We can get that all straightened out. It'll take a lot less money because we'll be able to move monies under that budget. We've got people in that Department of Education that don't create anything. They don't design anything. All they do is shuffle papers, and they've been found to be using the pornography off of their computers. So that'll be taken care of, and you'd be surprised at what I've done in that solution. The IRS, we're going down to 13 pages. That's all we need. I suggest, and I would adhere to 10% taxes across the board. If it was good enough for God, it's good enough for the fat pig called government. And let me tell you why, folks, as you're listening. We've got a Congress that is continually helping themselves to the dollars and the tax dollars that you are sending in. They're going into different different hands. It doesn't matter
30.
anymore if it's a Democrat or a Republican. So there's a couple of things we can do with these departments. But for right now, I think we'll just do some rearranging and some reorganizing, and it'll get done, and the budget will go down.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Cummings.
Thank you. I think the place to start and to use as a model for several other cabinet departments is the Department of Education. I promise to veto any appropriation bill that has any appropriation for the Department of Education except liquidation expenses. I will appoint someone as the cabinet official similar to Thomas Sowell, whom I expect to enrage the teachers' unions. If it doesn't enrage the teachers' unions, will make another choice. I intend to dismiss all the personnel. When they don't get paychecks, they won't come to work. Liquidate the property for the benefit of the national debt and make the Department of Education an item of the past. This same pattern should be applied to other departments. The ones that come most readily to mind are the ones of health and human services and housing and urban development. But likewise should be given no appropriation except
30.
liquidation expenses. My choice of cabinet official will be those who understand the importance of total liquidation and dismantlement. Again, liquidating all of
15.
the assets into the private sector, selling off and applying that to the national debt. In addition to those 15 main departments, there are approximately 260 other subsidiary agencies, many of which should be faced with total liquidation.
Time is up, Dan.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Now we're going into if there's any rebuttals, if you would hold, I'm going to go to what we call gallery view. If you have a rebuttal, I'll take that and we'll do it in the order. So is there anybody besides Dan Cummings that would like to add a rebuttal? Okay. Don Grundmann, anybody else? Okay. So to maintain the continuing order, you have 1 minute for rebuttal. Go ahead, Don.
As a continuance, if we're talking about the budget, I believe we have to look at the currency situation. When the Federal Reserve came in, they had what was called an elastic currency, and that's resulted in, even to this day, you have a massive turning on of the printing presses to furnish by what we call currency, whatever the government funding shortage is. I believe we have to return to constitutional principles, and that involves challenging the central bank and its power to tax, and that gets into the power of the IRS. Is the IRS truly legitimate? I would say no.
30.
So based on a constitutional aspect, looking at it constitutionally, we have to look at, in fact, was the 16th Amendment actually ratified? I would say no. The evidence says no. So we have to track back to our foundations in order to
15.
cut off this massive funding flow, which will go on perpetually and to continually depreciate the buying power of our currency.
Okay, thank you. Dan Cummings.
I would direct I would direct a challenging question to one of the candidates who thought that the Department of Education was not ready for total liquidation. Where is the constitutional authority for the federal government to be involved in education to any degree whatsoever?
Okay, well, that was Sam. Sam, do you wish to make comment?
We can't do a thing, gentlemen, until we get into that White House, because right now you got money just flowing out. That $8.3 billion on that Corona beer and that virus flu was such a joke, and we're on the streets. The people know it. There's your rebuttal.
All right, thank you. All right, Gary, back to you. Follow-up question or the next question?
So I'm going to do a follow-up question regarding the transition time. So we kind of got Sam indicating her point of view, but just to clarify that, what are you looking at as far as how to transition from where we are at to where you would like to be? Is this something that you feel needs to be done right away, over your first term, that type of thing? Kind of just give me an idea of how you would plan on dismantling all of these different departments.
Okay, so randomized again. First up is Don Blankenship. Go ahead, Don.
In my experience with liquidating, businesses is that you need some time to do analysis, but I would expect that the big chunk would be fairly identifiable. We certainly need to have less than 255,000 employees, if that's the correct number. And my guess would be you could get half of it in the first year and a quarter in each of the second and third year, just off the cuff from what I've experienced in the business side. And this idea that I think Sam said 255 sub-agencies in all these departments, what you would want is a task force or some group that's looking at each one of these cabinet positions or agencies and that was looking down deep into these sub-agencies to see exactly what it is they're supposed to be doing. Having worked in or around the government a lot, and been exposed to government regulations and what I would call bureaucrats, you could probably cut half of every department and not miss, the people that left. There's so much time off and so much conferencing and so little productivity. I would be greatly surprised if you couldn't cut every agency by 50% and not notice that you'd cut anything if you instated good work rules and performance expectations. So I don't think it would take very long. In fact, I think you could cut probably half of the money that's
30.
spent in all these agencies within 2 years. And I'll just end it there. I just think the waste is so great that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, to use a term that's used in business a lot.
All right, thank you. Sam Tittle.
Okay. On that rebuttal, we've got an overflux of employees. But this Constitution debate that we're getting into, patriots out there and my colleagues in here, is that we have got to start looking at Congress. You have got people in there that are taking your salaries and they are making a joke out of it. They're getting paid kickbacks, and that is exactly where your monies are going. So we got to get in there right away, and we've got to take a look at what's going on. You've got to look at anybody that's gone over a 2-term, and you got to start examining things with where is the money going, and that's an easy place to look. So with the rebuttal, the Department of Education has to be reorganized. And I'm telling you, as the sun came up this morning, we've got the perfect solution. Other than that, we've just got to take it one step at a time. So what would I do right away? Look at the whole picture. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to be in the White House.
All right, Sam, thank you. Don Grundmann.
Well, if we're looking at Congress, which definitely we have to look at, I believe we have to look at the power structure, which has kept Congress in effect for so many years. And that's a natural consequence of Washington, where all the pigs go up to the trough and they feed on the trough, and it's irregardless of them. It doesn't matter to them how much it shatters the people, how much it hurts the people, how much it's against the foundations of the country. So I believe we have to do two things essentially. The leader of our party and is when we go into the election, we have to make a clarion call to the people to overcome this corruption. I believe it's been drowned out by everyone gets a cut of the action. We have to send a clarion call that getting a cut of the action is actually harmful to our country. And so we have to call a special type of patriotism to challenge Congress and for people to stand up for what's better than getting a cut of the action. And again, I go back to the IRS and I'll go to the Federal Reserve that once we get the money power back and we have to get it back in the power and the control of the people via eliminating the private banking cartel, which we know is the Federal Reserve, and taking that under control of our government via issuing interest-free United States notes from the Treasury as compared to the debt money which we have in our pocket, Federal Reserve notes. The Federal Reserve notes and the Federal Reserve cartel gives fantastic, overwhelming power to what I call the plantation masters who control our nation, who are taking us, trying to take us from a democracy from our constitutional republic. So we have to go after the real root of the problem.
30.
The people who have the power to strangle us with turning the printing presses on and stop that fiscal irresponsibility.
All right, thank you. Charles Kraut, let me get you there. Go ahead.
Thank you. My proposal involves at least one and perhaps two generations. Why? Because we have a culture which has become accustomed to an immense government, an immense and wasteful bureaucracy. And we have the majority of the American people receiving one or more forms of subsidy from the 2,000 plus federal giveaway programs. They're not going to respond favorably to having their benefits cut overnight or anytime soon for that matter. So like an addict going through withdrawal symptoms, the government needs to be reduced incrementally, unfortunately, very slowly. Now, one of the factors driving this is the fact that our national debt is unsustainable. We'll never pay off what we have now. And in addition to a $20-some trillion national debt, we have a number somewhere between $100 and $200 trillion of unfunded liabilities, not counting corporate pension plans, which are about to fail as interest rates go negative. So we've created enormous problems for ourselves, partly because of the Federal Reserve and the way the Treasury Department has surrendered its authority over the dollar to the Federal Reserve, a private corporation. But people need to understand these things. We have an uneducated populace. People do not express informed opinions, they express uninformed opinions. And as I noticed in the free and equal debate in Chicago the other day, the preponderance of opinion is in favor of more government, more spending, and fixing problems which may or may not really exist, such as global warming / climate change. My approach would be to engage in fireside chats as president, similar to what Franklin D. Roosevelt did, expressing confidence in America's future and the importance of our own personal responsible citizenship. Thank you.
All right. Dan Cummings, let me get your highlighter here real quick. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm very concerned about the gradualism expressed by some of the candidates. Gradual change is very susceptible by human nature to postponement. If we plan on 5% this year, it's so easy to put that off a year or two or three. We are on a crash course going downhill in a bus over a cliff. Drastic action is needed. I think back to the Department of Education priorities. Checks to the state should stop as fast as possible, preferably immediately. Paychecks to most of the employees should stop as fast as possible, preferably immediately. Liquidation of real estate maybe should be a little slower. There could be problems from flooding the market with empty federal real estate. Some of the real estate might be better handled on the taxpayers' at the taxpayers' benefit by mothballing and slow liquidation. But the addiction part should be dealt with quickly. The state
30.
should learn quickly that they're on their own. And it probably will not cost them 8% because without federal mandates, state expenses should go down, in some cases very sharply. The states can dismiss some of their personnel whose sole purpose and job description is complying with federal mandates.
Time.
That should be eliminated ASAP.
All right. Thank you. We're going into rebuttals. If anybody has them, raise your hand and I'll go into the order that this was done. So I see Sam and Dawn. So anybody else? All right. So Sam, you'll be first. You have 1 minute.
Okay, here we go. You know, Mr. Daniel Cummings, I like you a lot, but I'm an American patriot to the core and I'm fed up. And I'm sure that a lot of these patriots out here are too. So when you talk about gradual, where were you when you should have been crying out with the rest of the patriots that Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 of the emoluments was being violated on the very first day when Donald Trump put his hand up to take the oath of office? We all know what's going on. He continues to get away with it. It happened just as soon as he got into office, just a few days with Keystone Pipeline, Dakota Pipeline, the West Virginia mine. He's doing it as of a couple of days ago with the 8.3 or $8.8 billion on this.
15.
What I'm asking, gentlemen, for your rebuttal is, where were you when this should have been handled a while ago?
Time. All right. So since that rebuttal was directed to Dan Cummings, I'm going to give Dan an opportunity to respond directly, and then I'll get back to you, Don. So
Yes.
Go ahead, Don, or Dan.
Thank you.
1 minute.
I've been at this for 60 years. I have never voted for president of the Republican or Democratic Party. I don't think anybody here has that length of a period of time in which they have been challenging, opposing, and trying to reverse the course on which we are.
Okay. Thank you. Don Grundmann, go ahead.
I can appreciate it. We have an ideological desire among all of us, I believe, to have things done immediately, such as cutting off the Department of Education and cutting off entitlements of whatever degree, which may be unmerited. But I believe we have to look at the practical realities. We're a political movement. We need, if we tried to do this immediately, we would idealistically be able to do it. In reality, we wouldn't be able to do it because we have to build a political movement to support everything that we're doing. And as leader of the party, as a standard bearer, that's one of the things we have to do. We have to, even though we don't like it to be incremental, because of the strength of our size compared to the strength of the people we're opposing, it's going to be incremental to the degree that we need to build up the knowledge of the people and build a political movement to support what we need to do. So I think we have to put that reality in front of us all the time. We're always every day educating. We're doing the best we can at this moment. We're looking for
15.
that moment in the future where we can accomplish our idealistic ideas. But we have to face the reality that the mass majority, we have to stop the train going the opposite direction and turn it back toward a constitutional direction as far as our culture.
All right. Thank you. Gary, any more questions on that line? Or
No, I'll
whatever?
turn it over to you, Randy. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to go to a completely different direction, but kind of towards the end of the Constitution. Many of you have probably become familiar with a movement that some have coined, I will say coined the phrase, the Convention of States. And so I'm going to randomize here and give you an opportunity. Number one, do you support a convention of states? And, you know, we all really understand that our government needs some help and some things that they need not to be doing. So are you in favor of a convention, an Article 5 convention, or what would be your solution? And starting off this round of questions will be Charles Kraut. Go ahead, Charles.
It's a very simple question for me to answer. Because of what I have learned about progressive movement and how extremely well organized and well funded it is, it seems obvious to me that any attempt to do an Article 5 convention would immediately be hijacked by the progressives. The Republicans, the conservatives, the Constitution Party, if it had any control, would lose all control over it, and we would end up with something very different than what we have today. It's not just that I'm thinking of the Constitutional Convention, which was formed to amend the Articles of Confederation. No, this is something completely different. This would be a complete replacement of the natural rights enshrined in the Declaration of Independence with the human rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a product of Eleanor Roosevelt and the United Nations, and which should never have allowed to, in any way, shape, or form, become part of the law of this land or any other land for that matter. Natural rights, of course, are given of God. Human rights come from government and are expensive. For us to go to a convention of states seemingly because it would have one single purpose and that would be all that they would deal with is just playing with fire. It is extremely dangerous, and it would probably result in the loss of many of our freedoms.
Okay. Samm Tittle.
Every American had better get back very quickly, and I'd say within the next 9 months. There's a baby coming by the name of Constitution. I took the liberty of naming the baby that's going to be due October 1st, November 3rd. We'll know what that's all about. The Article 5 is a good thing for a lot of patriots to get involved in, but they better get back to the one thing that the founding fathers gave them. This is a republic, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a democracy. You can use a democratic word all you want. This is a republic. One voice, one vote. And we had better do it this election. So you may have all these different things that you want to get to, but we got to get back just down to the basics. And before I'm ending right here at this time, Randy, only asking, there's a lot of notes coming in saying, can you tell them one more time where they can find the Constitution Party on the YouTube channel live? How do they get to it?
Okay. Let's go with okay. We will pause for the cause. Folks, I've got the link to the YouTube live is on Constitutionally Correct. If you go to Constitutionally Correct, the Facebook page, the link will be there where you can click on it and come into this YouTube live presidential debate. So I've tried to get it posted on several of my pages. And so people, if they will they could go to Randy's Stufflebeam. It's there as well. And if you've got other people that can share that link around the Facebook community, email it out. Next time, we're going to just bypass Facebook. We've had too much problems. This came in really easy. So we're going to start advertising that we will be hosting this using YouTube Live, because it seems like it came up pretty good. Thank you for that question. Do you have more that you wish to resume on there? You've got 54 seconds left.
54 seconds is a really good lot. Gentlemen, God only knows who the Constitution candidate is going to be the nomination. And I'm looking so forward to the Constitution being the principal and president of the United States of America. So we all are going to deliberately make sure that one of us is elected. And I hope to God it will be myself. I can't wait to come up against Donald John Trump, who thinks there's no one out there, especially a woman, that can beat him. I will. I can. Thank you very much, Randy.
All right. Don Grundmann.
I would say that we have to, the idea of a convention we have to avoid that totally. It's a great idea. Theoretically, it should be functional. But as Charles said, and I totally agree with him, it will be easy enough for the powers that be, which have trained us to already ignore the Constitution, which we have, to override and take control of such a convention. And we would see nothing like our Constitution, which would be produced by it. It would totally eliminate our rights. Our Second Amendment rights would be gone, guaranteed, and we would be slaves under what we would have advertised to us that it was a wonderful thing, even better than the original. But the end result was that we would be slaves. And we have to restore actually our own Constitution. Instead of ignoring it like the old blue dress example, which I mentioned before, we have to go back to what we've already got. And that's what we should do, what we should promote in every possible way. And that comes down to fiscal responsibility. It comes down to getting rid of excess government departments, which are not authorized by the Constitution. The Constitution in and of itself will do a fantastic, we follow that, the original blueprint, and we're good to go. There's no need for a second convention. It's been promoted because the powers that be ignore the Constitution now. We just have to solve that problem. But that's where the Constitution Party leads in a political movement to promote what our name says we stand for and say that the
30.
Constitution is cool. Constitution was cool before cool was invented. So we have the right frame for government. We have the right frame for government, which will help all people, all colors, all races, everybody under the sun will benefit when we bring back the real Constitution and actually pay respect to it and follow it, as compared to the two political parties now, which flush it down the toilet.
All right, Dan Cummings.
Thank you. I have several amendments to the Constitution that I would like to see implemented to cut back the authority and the size of the federal government. However, I do not advocate that the Article 5 convention method be used on any of them. In our present culture, there is no chance that good will come out of such a convention. We will be overwhelmed by the progressives who will dominate that, and they will give us something resembling the United Nations Charter as a result. So I will oppose an Article 5 convention under all circumstances, including those few amendments to the Constitution that I advocate myself, one of which I have written in detail. There's no place for a convention in preserving and restoring our Constitution. Amendments that are favorable should come from the Congress through the states in the customary way that all prior amendments have been adopted.
Okay. Don Blankenship.
Yeah, I think what Dan said there at the very end is right. So I think there's actually been one amendment, and that was to repeal another amendment in 1933 that was done through the state convention. But I will admit to not having spent a lot of time understanding what all the rules and how all that would work. But I think, you know, the policy or the Constitution and going through the Congress and having majority votes and so forth is much better than putting the states together. The states have become, to a great extent, so dependent on the government that I don't think they're in a position to be neutral, if you will, in terms of taking care of the people. They're more likely to take care of the state. And right now, you know, they probably be scared to death to be cut off from everything from Medicaid to all the other benefits that they're getting. So I would join the group, if you will, and be against it, admitting at the same time that I haven't really studied it a great deal. It's not something that's been on my radar a lot, but certainly it would be a dangerous approach to take, having a state convention that allows major influence to take place and cause constitutional amendments that are, if you will, damaging as opposed to helpful.
All right, thank you. All right. I see that we do have a person that wants to have a rebuttal. Is there anybody else that wishes to rebut or add a comment or a question or whatever? All right. Seeing none, Dan Cummings, go ahead.
Not really a rebuttal, just a historical fact. The 21st Amendment was ratified in state conventions. It was proposed by Congress in the usual way. No amendment has ever been made to the Constitution by the convention proposition. It has never happened.
Okay. So a follow-up question. I'm tempted to just cut it to 1 minute. And I think I will, just kind of as a follow-up. So we know that you all and every one of you have really confessed that you would be against it. But, you know, we can be against a lot of things. Give us kind of a 1 minute scenario of how would you fix the situation that it seems that our federal government is not upholding the Constitution, which is what everybody's concern is, that they want to have this convention because then we can finally force them to obey the Constitution or something like that. What would your solution be? And we'll start with Charles Kraut. Let me get your video. I got to scan over there real quick. Here we go. Charles, go ahead. 1 minute, please.
This is not a question with an easy answer. It's not a matter of fixing things. As I said, we have a culture which is developed around having gone in the wrong direction for more than a century now. You don't just put on the brakes and switch into reverse. You have to move things gradually over a period of time because you have to change the culture at the same time you are changing the way that government functions. Our government is dysfunctional in part because of all the campaign contributions they receive from, and other contributions they receive from these various lobbying organizations like the pharmaceutical industry, the banking industry. It is the way it is because people no longer
20 seconds.
Only do not act in good faith as they did during the Constitutional Convention. They don't vote their conscience, they don't vote their principles, they vote the way their party tells them to or the way they personally feel they ought to. That needs to be changed. So forcing the government to change, no, not when there's no political will to make the necessary changes. We do it through educating the people and letting them understand that they need to hold their elected officials' feet to the fire and make sure that they uphold their oath of office to support.
Okay, time. Dan Cummings.
Thank you.
1 minute.
Much has been said here about not being able to do things immediately because it's contrary to human nature. I understand that thoroughly. But if we back off from timetables, that same human nature will slow down whatever the plans are. When I say I want something done immediately, I understand that it will probably take a few years.
30 seconds.
But if we plan to taper something off over 5 to 10 years, that same human nature that will put a drag on it, it will take 20 to 30. If we plan to take it over a generation, the same human nature will make it take several generations. And several generations, we will not have a country or a constitution.
Time. Thank you. Samm Tittle. Give me 1 second.
Okay, you ready for me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. We do not have time. I want to be the Constitution Party's candidate. We've got to get a vociferous, unstoppable calling from the top of the mountain. We are in trouble yesterday. If Donald John Trump stays in there 2 days after yesterday, this country is gone. You have no more Constitution, and I'm going to show you why.
30.
And the man can change the Second Amendment by just an executive signature, banning a bump stock, whether you like them or you don't like them, and then
20.
endorsing a red flag law. You've got a major problem because the next thing that man will think about doing is totally wiping out any kind of television or communication that we've got. got me on some minutes here?
Your time is up.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Don Grundmann.
Well, we have to build that political movement to change the culture, and that's where the bully pulpit of being a Constitution Party candidate and shifting, making sure that we are the cultural icons. We're the last political party standing, and we have to make that known fantastically to all the to everyone that we're going to hold up these principles which everyone else has abandoned, but we won't and don't. So that has to be brought out to the public and that's where the educational campaign
30.
That's taking that as Charles said, we can't stop on a dime. We're going to steer the boat back in the opposite direction, but that's where we provide what no other party will do and lead us back with the Constitution Party as a standard.
15.
And that's where we have to be the premier by word association. When people think of the Constitution, they'll think of our party and no other party because we stand for its principles and they don't.
All right. Thank you. Let me get Don Blankenship. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the question we're working on, which I've sort of lost track of, is what do we do if we don't use a state convention to change the Constitution in ways that improve it? Is that correct?
That's close enough.
Okay. Of course, I think you first have to ask yourself what you want to get done. And of course, Congress is not very motivated to do a lot of what we need to get done, like term limits and balanced budget amendments and so forth and so on. So I think that it's going to take a lot of effort to educate the public because I think that people in Congress already know it.
20.
I think what I would propose doing is making sure that we have some sort of a way to communicate to the public how critical it is, and that while they don't want to lose their rep or vote against their rep having 30 years in Congress, that we have to get it passed, and we would do it through the normal channels. But, I don't see anything wrong with a president of the United States advocating and publicizing on a daily basis whichever of these constitutional amendments he most prefers to get passed, and making sure that the public gets behind it. I think the public better understands that the spending levels can't continue, and that we can't be policing the world, and that, we have to have the rule of law and so forth. And as you decide among a committee of people like-minded of the group that's debating here tonight, what it is you want to get done, the path to getting it constitutionally passed would be different depending on what the particular amendment that you're trying to pass would be.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so going back to Gary with questions. I know he's got some important things that he, on behalf of the people of these United States of America, want to know. Go ahead, Gary.
So viewing the job as the president as the executive who carries out and enforces the laws versus creating them, I want to talk about that position regarding sanctuary cities. And I'm going to start with the immigration side of things. And I'll also tie it in with the states now passing marijuana laws, which on a federal side of it have been declared illegal, but mostly on the immigration side of it. Those states and cities that are saying we're declaring these sanctuary cities, we are going to disobey and refute the federal laws that are in place. As president, how would you address these issues with these sanctuary cities?
Okay, Don Blankenship, you're first up on this one.
So first of all, when you have laws that so many people feel compelled to violate, you need to look at the law. I think what's going on is different parts of the country have different views because they have different experiences. The New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada is a lot different than West Virginia and Kentucky. But I think that what we have to have when you have civil uprising, so to speak, of the type that we're having in terms of illegal immigration, you got to get your heads around what policy would make sense, and make a policy that is, if you will, agreeable to a majority of the people, and then you enforce the law. If you can't do that, you got to do away with sanctuary cities entirely, because you can't have illegal immigration be legal. The word illegal ends that conversation, although given the mess we've been in that regard for so many years, like so much else, it's hard to just step out there and start deporting people that have been here all the time, or if you know, all their life, I should say. So basically, I would be in favor of setting a period of time of 6 months to a year for Congress to come up with something that works, knowing that if it doesn't work, we're going to close the borders and support who we can and close, do away with funding for sanctuary cities. But at the same time, I would be seeking some way to find a solution that didn't tear the country apart, because there's so much that we need to work together on that it's hard to make every issue a polarizing issue that makes it difficult to get
30.
the other things need to be done, get done. So I would be in favor of first trying to find a solution. And if that failed, going back to the basic thing that the president swears, that is uphold the law as it is.
Okay, thank you. Charles Kraut.
We have to look at the actual authority of the president as the executive and as the man in charge of enforcing the laws. My concern, and a lot of people have talked to me about, well, you would need to issue executive orders to ban abortion and do things like that immediately upon becoming president. I totally disagree. If any elected official, especially the president, does not completely uphold his oath of office, what good is he? He's only going to be reversed by the opposing party once they achieve that office, if he's not reversed by the Congress or by the courts. But if he is doing that which he is constitutionally required to do, then that's much more difficult to reverse or to undo, especially if he makes the case to the American people as to why he is taking that action. So in the case of marijuana, does the federal government have any authority whatsoever? Not according to the Constitution. So how do you change that? You let the states decide as to what's appropriate. Now, how are you going to get the federal marijuana laws repealed? Very good question. That's a matter of working with the Congress as the president, which is what I would do. Sanctuary cities is a much more pressing issue. I live in Virginia, where more than 100 communities, counties, and cities in the state have made themselves sanctuary cities on behalf of the Second Amendment. Their cause is just. The cause of sanctuary cities for sheltering illegal aliens is not just and is a violation of the law. It's a very difficult thing. Are the people trying to uphold the Constitution, or are they trying to violate the Constitution? That makes the decision and the action on the part of the president a lot easier.
All right, thank you. Hold on a second. Where's my screen? There it is. Lost it for a second. Dan Cummings. Let me get you pulled up here just a second. Here we go. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. It depends on the issue. Rather well stated by Charles. I'm not very worried about sanctuary for marijuana. That's a problem for those states. They can deal with the problems they made for themselves. Sanctuary cities for immigration is another matter. I think that these cities should be given a stern warning and a short timetable of a few days to redeclare their loyalty to the United States and their pledge to cooperate with its laws, and otherwise lose all funding that comes to those state governments or city governments, leaving individuals out of it in the beginning to see how the first round plays out. Most cities, most state, and all states get substantial federal funds that is within the jurisdiction of the legislature to control. It will be a shock to them not to have that money. And as far as immigration goes, I intend to inflict that shock to the best of my ability.
30.
Other matters probably are in between marijuana and immigration. But we opened the floodgates in immigration some 50 years ago, and it's time that we get things under control. It might take 50 years of no immigration to do so. I intend to do what it takes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Don Grundmann.
I can appreciate what Mr. Blankenship said. We don't want to tear apart the country, but I would say that we're there already. And if we allow the people who are promoting sanctuary cities to continue unopposed and do not stop their actions, then they will tear apart the country, and they'll be happy to do it. You know, they're more than happy to flood the country with illegal aliens and destroy our cultural fabric or anything else they can destroy. So I would reverse course somewhat from what he mentioned. I would first immediately shut down the border, put up whatever wall Mr. Trump doesn't accomplish. I would finish the job. That needs to be done immediately. We have to have an immediate clampdown on illegal immigration. Then we can go to the Congress and we can have a negotiation for whatever proper laws will fill in the gaps to reinforce what we do. And we want to re-emphasize something also in our party, that the social engineering of our nation has made enforcement of our laws, such as illegal immigration, against illegal immigration, that is somehow harmful, it's mean-spirited and all such things. What we're actually trying to do is to protect the wage scale of our workers, so that our workers are not driven into poverty by the labor competition. There are many, many, many things involved in stopping illegal immigration, which are beneficial to all the citizens of our country. And we have to learn to not be, that's where the Constitution Party can come and provide the public discourse and the leadership to not be, tell everyone not to be snowed by the lies which the illegal immigration lobby promotes, to promote their law breaking.
15.
I would say sanctuary cities need to be stopped instantly. And that's what I would do if I'm fortunate enough by the Creator's blessing to take office. They would be stopped in the snap of a finger.
All right. Thank you. Samm Tittle.
Let me show you the biggest sanctuary city that we've got today. It is the presidency of the United States of America. You got a lawbreaker in there, gentlemen, patriots, and enough is enough. But let's get to sanctuary city. That's just a crackerjack word. What we got to understand is if Gloucester and Virginia had not stepped in with a temporary state and they called it a sanctuary city, there would be no guns or weapons today in the homes of the American patriot, their Second Amendment right. I was there. I stood up very quickly and abruptly and vehemently demanding that Donald Trump get his hands off of our Second Amendment and our guns, our last line of defense. I demanded that Governor Northam get his hands off of our Second Amendment, our guns. That is the last line of defense that isn't given to you by the government. It isn't given to you by the founding fathers. It was just instituted so that you'd see it in black and white. It was given to you by God, as I've told you before in Luke 22:36. Jesus was walking and said, go to town, take your purse, take your sword. And if you don't have a sword, take your cloak and sell it and buy a sword. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got to get off of word plays and mumble jumble and macaroni and cheese. We got to get down to brass tacks. I want that sanctuary city taken away from Donald Trump, and I want it taken away yesterday.
Okay. Thank you very much. Back to you, Gary. Anything further?
Yeah, so the opposite side of that question would be, and Samm kind of brought it up, in that in the open and free debate, there was a candidate there that was, I believe he was a libertarian, but he indicated that he would issue just blanket pardons for anyone that committed a victimless crime. And that got me thinking about these red flag laws and protecting our Second Amendment rights. In the preview as the executive and the enforcer of the laws, would you be willing to issue something like blanket pardons for anyone that stands up to protect their Second Amendment rights against red flag laws or other gun confiscation laws. And then take it even a step further. Would you be willing to use law enforcement, federal law enforcement officials, or other federal officials to protect those citizens from states that have gone rogue and are saying, we're going to take your guns?
All right. First up is Sam Tittle. Go ahead.
What we look at right now is you had a death in Maryland because you got a of the United States has his hands military administration documentation. He was looking anywhere he could for the 4 letters of PTSD. And what happened is they sent someone out to Maryland, and one of the gentlemen out there said, "You're not taking my guns." They went ahead and challenged that. He's dead, ladies and gentlemen, he's gone. And so with that said, we have got to take a look at this, and we have to arrest what's going on in this country. And we have got to do it on formats like this YouTube, and then you've got to get it out. And these fine gentlemen in here have the same aspiration as I do, to get in there, get that man out of office as fast as we can. He's stealing. Now, with Mr. Grundmann, Don, I love you dearly, my friend, but I didn't like when I heard you say we're going to get back to completing that wall. That is a joke. I lived in El Paso, Texas, 5 minutes away from that border, and that is not necessary to have a fence, a wall. Donald Trump took $1.6 billion, bought Russian steel, and went out there and built a 1-mile fence. And guess what, Don? It blew over. They are flying them over. You got Barack Hussein Obama, who
30.
got 200,000 back in 2013, and now they're hiding out. So it takes a little bit longer than 30 seconds in a minute. We got this, ladies and gentlemen. I want to be your president.
All right. Thank you. Don Blankenship.
Yeah, first of all, you didn't do the rebuttal a moment ago. I would like to say on the illegal immigration that I too am in favor of immediate closure of illegal immigration, whatever form it takes, whether it takes electronic surveillance or concrete walls, but whatever it takes. But at the same time, on sanctuary cities, you've got a lot of people in those cities that have been there since they were 6 months old. So I don't know what you do with them. Maybe you don't allow the city to be a sanctuary, but you got to figure out what you're going to do with people that don't have any other home other than the United States after having been here essentially all their lives.
Hey, Don, just so that you know, I did pause your time, and I apologize to everyone else. We might revisit this again because the sanctuary city, because I did want to hit some things on immigration, but I just wanted to let you know I did pause the time so you could get that. And if somebody else wants to mention anything else further, I'll pause the time for 30 seconds. Go ahead, finish out what you were, the question, if you remember it.
Yeah, I'm finished with that rebuttal, so to speak. As far as like if states were to pass laws infringing on the Second Amendment, unlike marijuana, the Constitution speaks directly to granting the power of Congress, so to speak, to make sure that we don't lose our Second Amendment. So, it's always dangerous to say you're going to go in and pardon people in every state, and you're going to go in and with guns and make sure people in states have the right to have guns, because that you hope it never gets that far. But certainly, as president, I would be there to uphold the Constitution, including all the amendments. And I would do whatever I felt was necessary to prevent states from passing legislation that damaged the Second Amendment. And for that matter, we need to prevent the United States government from passing laws, as I mentioned earlier, like Sullivan versus New York Times, to the judiciary that infringes on the First Amendment. Because in my mind, there's a reason the First Amendment is the First Amendment, and that is because you can't defend the other amendments if you don't have the right to speak freely. And people like ourselves who are out there in public trying to speak these truths about the Constitution, if we can be held to a different standard, because the federal
30.
the federal courts in 1964 passed a law that disadvantaged us as public speakers versus the media, the free press. And so we are unable sometimes to get our message
15.
popularized or heard. And that is a critical problem for all of the Constitution.
All right, thank you. Don Grundmann, you're up next.
In answer to the question, I would say that yes, we need to defend the Second Amendment in every possible way. And if necessary, if it got to that point where the states were going in and starting to seize guns from the citizens, I believe the executive and the president needs to step in and protect the Second Amendment. And so that would be a priority to defend our Constitution. If it comes to that, I would agree with Mr. Blankenship. I hope it would never come to that. But if it does, we need to do so. And I believe we can do practical things along that way to defend the Second Amendment. We need to do everything practical. But also, if we even call some things as not spiritual, but illustrative, I can't think of the proper word, but going back to the wall, which I believe we can tie to the Second Amendment, the wall, symbolic is the word. Even if the wall does nothing else, it is a symbolism of what we should do and what we can do. And in the practical sense, Israel has a wall too, which has dramatically dropped terrorism in their country. So walls do work. Now, will they cut off 100% of everything? No, but they do. They are a start. And so that is a wonderful start, which we should take as compared to not taking it. And that symbolism can come through our administration as a Constitution Party, that under no circumstances do we allow the diminishment of the Second Amendment. And I think we have to have a very important point. The people who support diminishing the Second Amendment, we're actually talking about religious values here. We're talking about a value which I believe all the mass shooters have in common, a degradation of human life, where they can shoot someone because they automatically, without thinking about it or not, whether they do or not, they have degraded that life to less than human. And that concept, which we know as pro-choice, where if anybody gets in your way, you can get rid of them without the slightest problem of a second thought about it. That is a religious degradation of life, which is transferred all throughout our culture, so that those people who defend our Second Amendment are branded or misbranded when we're actually defending the cause of defending all human life.
All right, thank you. Charles Kraut, let me get you pulled up here real quick. Go ahead.
Thank you. These are not necessarily related issues about illegal aliens and amnesty and the Second Amendment, but you always have to ask the question, does the president have the authority to intervene in the affairs of the state? I seem to see that situation in the Constitution Party itself, where nationals interfering in the actions of the states, and the states don't like it. And I don't think it's appropriate for the president necessarily to take any action because it's not within his constitutional purview under the 10th Amendment. That said, how would we resolve an issue like that? It must be a matter for the courts to decide. And if it gets to the United States Supreme Court, so be it. The fact that a state or other political entity is acting in violation of the Constitution of the United States is a clear violation. But who is the enforcer? And I don't believe that the president is.
Okay, thank you. Dan Cummings. Go ahead.
I am favorable to the concept of pardoning all gun crimes, all federal gun crimes, when there is clear and convincing evidence that there was no victim involved. When the evidence is less clear, it should be looked at more individually. I am concerned about the idea of the president being an enforcer on the states. There's also, we must understand that the founders intended the Bill of Rights to bind the federal government, but not the states, at least in some cases. That's very obvious in the First Amendment. I'm not sure that their viewpoint on the Second Amendment was any different. The wording is more ambiguous. The wording of the Second Amendment clearly forbids any federal law against self-armament. That's as clear as it can be. And it's a clear declaration of individual rights, not just group rights, and not just militia. The situation for the states is more ambiguous.
30.
We did not have any concept of the Bill of Rights on the states outside of their own constitutions until the middle of the 20th century. And that was imposed upon the states
50.
by some of our most constitutionally renegade federal judges who are not recognized by constitutionalists in any other way as having been at all in accordance with the Constitution. So there's things yet to be worked out on that issue as far as the states. I fear a government and a president that goes too heavily to war against states and cities.
Time. Okay, so we'll take a look. I'm going to go to our gallery view, and anybody that wishes to have an additional minute to speak or have a rebuttal against one, please raise your hand. Let me know. Okay, I see Sam. Anybody else?
How do you raise your hand?
Like this? I'll see. I can see you may raise your hand in the video.
Okay, I'm raising.
There you go.
Okay, make sure it's there,
Okay.
you know. Okay,
Right.
so Charles and Sam. So I've got Sam that was leading. So go ahead. You've got 1 minute, Sam.
I just want to go back really quickly to the sanctuary. We've got to do away with that. There's a woman that's collecting a Social Security check. She's been doing that for 20 years. She's totally illegal. The story is clear. It was on the news just a couple of days ago. We're looking at citizens of the United States of America that can't even afford, the food, the medicine that they need. And we're giving it to an illegal that is in the United States of America. I believe, if my memory serves me
30.
correctly, Chicago. We've got to do away with sanctuary cities. And with that said, let me let you move on.
Okay, Charles, go ahead.
Couple of points, one of them about sanctuary cities. It's important that we make a distinction between the individuals residing in those political jurisdictions and the jurisdiction itself. It would be essential that if we're going to impose any federal punishment upon a city, county, or state, which is a sanctuary city, county, or state, that we punish that political entity, not the citizens. So, for example, we might want to cut off federal funding for highway, police, social services, and such, but nothing which is a direct contract between the federal government and the individual citizens, like Medicare and like Social Security. So block grants for welfare would be a gray
30.
area here. Now, as for amnesty, one of the reasons why we have so much illegal immigration is because aliens are confident that at some point in time they will be granted amnesty. And we've done it, what,
15.
3 or 4 times in the past 30 years. The promise is there, the guarantee that they're going to have that. And finally, there should be no federal crimes except those specified in the Constitution, and that's counterfeiting and treason, and that's about it. Okay.
All right, go ahead, Dan.
I'll make a pledge never to grant amnesty to an illegal alien for anything. And I favor banning all illegal aliens from citizenship for lifetime, forever.
Okay. So I've got to make a comment. Gary, I'm never showing you my questions again. My whole immigration thing just went out the window. They've pretty well answered every question that I had written down about whether they believed in the wall, whether it was president's authority, if the wall was constitutional, and our sanctuary cities constitutional, and do you or not support them? So I think, yeah, thank you, Gary. Appreciate that, buddy. So I'm going to move on to another section of topic in this constitutional debate. And it's going to, Gary accused me of being like this is going to be a constitutional test in high school. You're not high school students, but I do believe that it is important, especially for the number one man in this country, to have a firm understanding of the Constitution, because he makes an oath to uphold and defend it. So I want to start with the idea, and this is going to be a question. Congress has the responsibility to coin money, but it seems that they are not. But is this situation, and it's an important aspect because of how the interest rates and how all these other things are managed and that sort of thing. What's your take on the what I would term constitutional money? And give me just a second to use the little randomizer to find out who's going to go first. So we have Dan Cummings going first. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. I generally tend toward precious metals for money. However, I don't think there is enough gold in the world to run a $20 trillion economy. That does not mean that I am in favor of government counterfeit money. Basically, I think that what we want is to see what comes out of the free market in terms of currencies. I think we should make precious metals optional with legal tender laws for those who wish to deal with it. We should recognize other contractual arrangements if there's not enough precious metal to run the entire economy. One place we should not have legal tender precious metals is for the federal government. We should not be required to pay our taxes in precious metals. Legal tender of the government's counterfeit money is a good idea for taxes and for government operations. They should be compelled to be run on their own unsound money and live with the consequences. That will help to incentivize the government to maintain some value in the money.
Okay, thank you. Don Grundmann.
We have to look at the history of what happened with the Federal Reserve coming in over 100 years ago now. In that amount of time, it's so entangled itself into our life system. Everyone is involved with the Federal Reserve System, with whether they know it or not. And so I would say, even though it's unconstitutional, we have to back out of having a private banking cartel such as the Federal Reserve, which has more power than the president. We have to seize control of of taking control of our currency. These were great questions which were debated over many, many years, inclusive of President Jackson over 100 years ago. These were great questions for the whole nation. But once the Federal Reserve got in power, that whole debate has been sterilized out of the knowledge of the public. So very few people of the public totally understand what's happened, that we've had a private banking cartel which has seized control of our monetary system. And I call them the American mafia. The Fed, in combined with their mafia leg breakers, which we know as the IRS. And so to stop what I call the American mafia, to regain control for our country, we need to nationalize the Federal Reserve. We need to issue what are called United States interest-free notes via the Treasury as compared to the Federal Reserve Bank. And that will be a titanic shift in power back to our republic, because once the Federal Reserve took control, that's how the monstrosity of government has grown as their printing press power. The faster they run the presses, the more deeper in debt we get to them, and the more we lose our constitutional republic to all the alphabet agencies which smash us into the ground and take our freedoms. So the key is to take control back of our monetary situation, nationalize the Federal Reserve, interest-free United States notes, and that way we can finish off the American mafia and regain control of our country in spending and so many other ways, and the freedom and prosperity that our country will have really in actuality as compared to a fake prosperity with fake dollars.
Thank you. Charles Kraut.
Wow, this is a very difficult question. It is probably true that there's not enough gold in the world to cover a $20 trillion economy, but that's not what we have. And if gold were priced at $10,000 an ounce, it is possible we would have enough. But that's no longer the point. Most transactions are conducted electronically today. So how would we use or create a precious metals standard or backing for money which really does not exist except as electronic bits and bytes? Cryptocurrencies have been created, some of which actually do have some sort of a physical backing, but they don't have the problem that was just discussed as far as the debt and the other problems of having a private corporation, the Federal Reserve, control our money. Now, the trend, and this is my area of what's actually happening, is the Federal Reserve is well aware of the fact that the dollar is very close to collapse. And arrangements from extensive reading on my part indicate that the International Monetary Fund is standing by, ready to create a special class of what they call SDRs, or special drawing rights, which will replace the United States dollar. This should happen within the next 10 years, unless we do something to prevent it. Now, if we were to privatize, or not privatize, it's already privatized, sorry, if we were to nationalize the Federal Reserve, bad choice of words, by the way, what I would do if I were the chairman of the Federal Reserve would be to immediately present a bill to the United States government for all the trillions of dollars that the Federal Reserve has created to buy the debt of the United States, which is one reason why we don't like to tweak China's tail too much, because of the amount of our debt that they hold. We would have a very difficult time repaying them. We would never be able to repay the Federal Reserve. So that's a problem without a solution at this point. But is change mandated? Absolutely, because the dollar is very much endangered right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Don Blankenship.
Well, I agree with Charles. It's a tough question. You know, over the millennials, I guess, or the thousands of years, there's been lots of, things other than gold that were used as a support for currency. Tobacco was even used, I think, in the United States for a while after we were first formed. So now we're using digital bats. So to be honest with you, I don't know that anybody can grasp how complicated it is, with the petrodollars and the way things have been for the last many years. I guess since 1971, when we did totally away with the gold standard. It's something that, in my mind, is the process to get to the right answer that has to be the president's goal, because you're dealing with something that could collapse world economies. You're dealing with something that's being done all around the world to see who can be the biggest dove in the currency world. So it's very complicated. There's people out there that know a lot about it, but there's also people out there that are taking huge advantage of it. And I would not be single-handedly capable of making the right decision to begin to return us to some sort of precious metal-based standard. But that certainly should be the goal, whether it's platinum or what it is. Things like Bitcoin certainly throw another element into it that I at least hear the big bankers are very much opposed to. But to be honest with you, I don't think that I know what the answer is. I know what the process needs to be. You got to get people around you like are speaking to it here,
30.
as well as people that have had a lot of experience with it, and people who understand the world economy and try to find a solution, because I do think we're on a path to disaster with what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Sam.
Yes, sir. I think everybody's got it right. It's complicated, but it's not all that complicated. You've got a American mafia that Don mentioned, and that happens to be the Trump family, starting at the top. I mentioned that Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8. You've got Ivanka and Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, and Don Jr. and the rest of them, making $98 million in less than 2.5 years, folks. That's your money. That's your tax dollars coming in, flying all over the place. They're using your money to make money, and it is against the law. It is stipulated in your Constitution that when you get a lawbreaker like that, they go to federal prison. So it's only a matter of time. Now, Mr. Blankenship mentioned that he didn't know exactly what to do right away. I do. I'm going to get elected President of the United States of America. I'm going to use the best academic minds and the best of the military minds to get this country back on track right away within the first 100 days. So I want every one of you to listen to me. Right now, you got a thief in the White House. The mafia family is the Trump family currently. And what you've got is coining money. That should have been really easy. The gold is going everywhere else except back into the people where that money is coming from, ladies and gentlemen. So it is
30.
a little complicated, but it can be fixed, and it can be fixed with the right people. And I've already considered Mark Sanford. He loves the fact that $19 trillion coming in with Obama and now 24 trillion with Donald Trump should have never been, and it shall not be.
All right. Thank you. Any rebuttals to it? I see Dan. Anybody else? All right. Dan, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm no friend of the Federal Reserve. I advocate a full audit of their operations for more than 100 years. If I get to appoint that commission, I will appoint Ron Paul as its chair. However, I'm not sure that Congress is any more trustworthy than the Federal Reserve.
Right.
This proposal for interest-free Treasury notes sounds very much like greenbacks of the Civil War, and they did not work well. And if we trust the government to make our money, I think things will get out of hand. The ultimate solution to the monetary problem is in the free market. Money was not invented by the government. Money was invented by the market to solve problems, and the market will give us our best answers.
All right. Thank you. I don't see anybody else. So,
Randy, one commentary.
oh, you got a hand up. Okay. I didn't see it. Sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead. You got 1 minute.
We can rely on the market ideally. In reality, we have a constitution which wants us to control the currency coinage. Going back to the Constitution, I would say that, again, we've been so entwined with the Federal Reserve for so long that going from where we are to where we should be can be such a trauma on the economy that it can blow a gasket of the economy in many places. That's why I suggest that we have the interest-free United States notes, which is the government returning control of the currency to itself as compared to farming out to a private banking cartel. So we're between a rock and a hard spot. Is the government totally trustworthy? I would say, of course not. Is the banking cartel
15.
totally trustworthy? I would say even worse. But let's go back to the Constitution. Let's find our way back slowly but surely by issuance of interest-free United States notes. And we can solve the other problems as we go along, as long as we maintain the economy and stop the parasite American mafia.
Okay. Any other rebuttals? It would be a 30-second shot. Okay. Don't see any hands. Gary. Well, actually, you know what? Before we do that, I want to stay in Article 1, Section 8 for one more question. Congress has the authority to declare war. A war has not been declared since World War II was the last time that our Congress ever declared war. Of course, we've been around the globe on what is considered police actions. We saw back in Obama's reign, I'll say his time, that there was a group of congressmen, representatives, federal representatives, who were suing Obama because these gentlemen said that Obama did not have the authority to take the troops into Libya. And most recently, the Congress was opposed to President Trump's use of a drone going in and assassinating anyone. They didn't ask their permission. So given this kind of circumstance that we have, that the authority really relies in Congress, but it has been moved over to the president to have all this authority under the War Powers Act. And of course, then on occasion, Congress is a little upset because the president didn't ask their permission. So my question for you is, now bear in mind, we are going to have a commander-in-chief debate coming up in the next couple of weeks. But the question in this particular regard is, how do you, as president of these United States, conduct any of this according to the Constitution? How would it be different for you than it is for any of the most recent administrations? And let me get my randomizer here going. And we're going with Charles Kraut. You're first up to bat.
Okay. Well, sections 10 and 50 of the U.S. Code discuss the role of the commander-in-chief and all the restraints placed upon him to both declare, which he cannot do, and to conduct war in the absence of congressional approval. All sorts of legislation has been created in the past 60 or 70 years to restrict the authority of the president to do so without specific authorization, and yet Congress has been relatively reluctant to give that authorization in almost every case. So we have this impasse where the president happens to think it's important we get involved in a war, like Vietnam, like Korea, and like Afghanistan, where Congress does not agree. Sometimes the president doesn't even ask Congress for authority. My concern is this thing about assassinations, death from above. What right do we have to kill people, innocent and people who just might possibly be guilty of something, without due process, without warning, and in a nation where we are not at war? I don't believe we have that right. As president, I would stop the use of armed drones against peoples of nations with which we are not at war immediately. In addition to that, certainly we have a different set of circumstances today than we had during the time of the American Revolution or the War of 1812, where we had some time to think about things as the British infantry was advancing on Baltimore and then on Washington and so on, to decide whether we were going to declare war or not. Now, with the push-button war, the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons, we do not have that luxury. So some
15
accommodation must be made for the president to be able to act in the event of an attack or an imminent attack upon the United States without consulting Congress. But otherwise, certainly the president needs the advice and consent of Congress on every military action he undertakes.
Thank you. Samm Tittle.
First off, you have to have a president. And the reason Barack Obama was challenged in a lawsuit is because he was never president. You had Nancy Pelosi, who affirmed him to be president in 2008. Now, when 2012 came around, maybe they didn't know in 2008 that he was or was not legally, rightfully, to be president of the United States of America. It has to do with the natural born citizen, and we lost Justice Antonin Scalia for it. Other than that, that's a little bit more complicated. We're going to leave that water under the bridge, and we're going to get to the current. Some of you may not remember the Moab, the mother of all bombs. That was Donald Trump, who just decided he was going to drop that bomb after it's sitting there for 75 years. And why did he do it? Could it be that he was going to make some money off of the kickback that was going to come from a General Dynamics rebuilding us a new weapon? People, enough. We are going to have a new president in the United States of America who is going to be one of us for all of us. And those things, those declarations of war, do not go to a president of the United States of America. The military brings it to him. They give him all the information he needs. And it's the Congress who holds that purse, whether we go into war or not. we have to look at this all over again, because the presidency of the United States of America is out of control for the last 12 years. We'll get it straight.
Okay, thank you. Dan Cummings.
Thank you. The key word in the Constitution is commander-in-chief. In my opinion, that makes the President of the United States the superior military officer. It does not put him in charge of the military. The Congress is in charge of the military. Not only does Congress have the authority to declare war and conclude peace, but it also has the authority to direct the operation of that war. Now, hopefully, Congress will be wise enough to allow the president a certain amount of discretion in conducting the war that they have declared. But the Congress has the absolute and ultimate authority in these affairs. A good comparison is a board of directors for a corporation and the CEO. The CEO has no primary authority. The authority is in the board of directors. The CEO is charged with implementing the policy. Congress has the authority to declare war, to conclude peace, and to direct the affairs of the war. Hopefully they're in a national crisis of wartime, there will be a good balance between the Congress and the president. But the commander-in-chief is simply the primary superior military officer, not the ultimate authority.
Okay, thank you. Don Blankenship.
Yeah, I think that, Charles touched on it there. There's a lot different time today when you have a push button war than when you had time to do something. So I think the president, I don't know exactly where you look for in the law to exactly find it, but he has to have the right to defend the country, the citizens of the country, and property of the country on a moment's notice. But policing the world or these things they call wars, which are actually just fragmented battles all over the world, probably have troops in 120 to 130 countries. Each one of those should declare a congressional approval or congressional control. So I think the president has to have the right to defend the country as if an individual was under assault, because he has to take immediate action. But all these other spats and so-called wars that are being undertaken all over the world should require congressional approval. Even in hindsight, they ought to have to go back and agree that what we're doing around the world is the right thing to be doing. So it's a tricky issue that's been confused by modern times, and of course, as is often the case, there's a lot of room for interpretation, and it's hard to foresee every circumstance that might arise. But I think the president has to have the ability in today's world to defend the country and the troops and the citizens at any time, and that Congress obviously has power over whether there's an actual war declared, and they should have power over whether we're going to be occupying all these countries as we have been now for probably 80 years.
Okay, thank you. Don Grundmann.
I believe there's multiple things we're discussing. One is that the president, as Mr. Blankenship mentioned, he has to have a flexibility to be able to deal with things immediately if they come to his attention that are a threat to the nation. And that is complicated. I believe that in the current situation, I believe President Trump, setting aside the missile attack on the general in Iran, if he had shared that information with his Democratic opponents, I believe they would have betrayed that action. And because I believe that there are people who are more interested in betraying our country and having a victory in that sense than they are in preserving our nation. If the president was entirely justified in doing that action, let's say that he was, I believe that there is a part of this political process in the Democratic Party in particular, who is more than willing to betray the country and have the detrimental effects of whatever attacks the general would have carried out, as compared to giving Mr. Trump the slightest bit of credit for stopping such attacks. But in another aspect, I believe we need to look about why these attacks are occurring. Why are we involved in these wars? And I would say that a big part of our current wars that we're involved in goes back to 9/11. And I believe that was a complete fraud. We need to reopen the investigation of 9/11. I believe that was a deep state action before we knew the name of deep state. That there were 2 planes which took down 3 buildings. The math of 9/11 does not add up. And I believe what it does add up to is a gigantic hoax on our nation, a great crime of treason against our nation, which paved the way for us to enter into Afghanistan and other places which have drained our country fantastically. And there's a historical precedent for 9/11 being a fraud, and that Pearl Harbor was a complete fraud. Franklin Roosevelt knew exactly where the Japanese were. They knew they were going to attack Pearl Harbor, but all the sailors, all the personnel were sacrificed because at that time, we needed a justification to go against war against Germany via Japan. And so 9/11 was a day, and Pearl Harbor was a day in infamy because Franklin Roosevelt betrayed our country and allowed Pearl Harbor, all the people there, to be killed in order for his greater purposes. And I believe that we'll find the same thing is for 9/11, but we need to reopen just to bring the evidence.
Sorry about that.
That it was a fraud.
Time is up.
Sorry.
I was saying given the time acts, and I'm like, okay, I had to turn down my volume so I could cough, and I apologize. I didn't get it turned back up. So I'm going to turn it over one more time for Gary for one final question. Then I will wrap up with a question. And then we'll give time for closing comments. I appreciate everybody's patience and time to try to get through these technical difficulties. But Gary, final question.
So going back again to the role of the executive, one of the things that the president does is appoint federal judges. We do have a judiciary that is out of control, that has gone rogue. So I'd like for you to address how would you go about selecting and appointing federal judges, and do you have a solution for those judges that are blatantly disregarding the Constitution and passing laws from the bench versus through the normal process?
Okay, first up is Don Grundmann. Go ahead.
That's a good question. In the sense, I'm not sure of the process that President Trump uses to select judicial appointees, but whatever he's doing, it's a step in the right direction. In the sense that that there's been numerous commentaries that I've seen that they say the District Number 9 court on the West Coast, which is notoriously liberal, has been reversed in direction, and that's an excellent start. And so whatever he's doing, I'm sure it can be added to, but I support his efforts and what he's done so far and his actions in accomplishing what he has to this point. And to stop those judges who rule from the bench and make up new laws, I'm unaware right now, there's no solution which occurs to me except that we have to suffer under that until we reform the judiciary with enough appointments from ourselves, and perhaps President Trump can accomplish the whole thing by the time he's out of office. But be that as it may, we can take over and redo whatever's done and bring back constitutionality to the judicial appointments. It leads to that cultural war, which allows those judges to be appointed by our opponents, such as Mr. Obama and Mr. Clinton and others, who can directly attack the Constitution and make up those laws with judicial fiat without caring about anything about the citizens, or especially the Constitution says. So getting a Constitution Party president in Canada is a sea change, where we lead by just bringing out that old blue dress and making it the primary dress for our nation, for our Statue of Liberty to wear. So we're revitalizing teaching the Constitution to our nation.
All right. Thank you. Don Blankenship.
Yeah, the problem with the judicial system, of course, is that it's based on words and not numbers. It's so subjective and not objective, but there are many opportunities to make it objective where these judges don't have the flexibility. We spoke earlier that Congress needs to take over the role that the Supreme Court and appeals courts have now taken, which is to decide what the law is. And somehow we need, in my view, and it may sound off the page, but we need a committee within Congress that has to address disputes between different groups or different circuits of the federal court so that they reconcile these things, because the Supreme Court only here's a small fraction, I mean, like 1% or less of the cases that are brought to it. And so people who are uncertain what the law is or are being treated differently depending on what part of the country they live in and what political party they belong to and what the issue is, that needs to be resolved. I also think that future courthouses should not include prosecutors and judges. There ought to be a federal courthouse for judges and a federal courthouse for prosecutors. And I would even raise the question of whether politicians who are lawyers who have been active in politics for years in certain regions should become federal judges in those same regions, because they effectively end up being the friends of their political supporters and political donors during the time that they were in politics. And so in the federal office, they're more likely to become activist judges. So there's a number of things that should be done. I doubt that I've woven it together in this 2 minutes well enough to be clear, but we need judicial reform in a bad way that makes it more objective and less subjective, and that cuts down on judicial activism.
Okay, thank you. Dan Cummings.
Thank you. Most of the solution to the judicial problem belongs to Congress. Article 3, Section 2, Clause 2 grants Congress the unlimited authority to determine federal appellate jurisdiction. And I would like to see Congress step forth and ban from the federal judiciary all matters of family law, all matters of medical care and pregnancy. That would eliminate the abortion decision and the homosexual marriage decision. As president, I will scrutinize those that I appoint for the judiciary, looking for strong constitutionalists. Those are hard to find in the legal profession, especially hard to find in the upper echelons. I will not worry about whether my appointments are approved by the American Bar Association. I consider that irrelevant. I will, if necessary, appoint non-attorneys to judicial positions if it takes that to rattle the judiciary. I think that if Congress refuses a few of my appointments, and then I give them a string of non-attorneys, then Congress will probably become more cooperative. Congress wants attorneys. They want a special attitude in attorneys, which is part of the problem. But I intend to appoint those who are qualified, and if it takes several dozen appointments to fill a spot, so be it. I can handle that.
Okay, thank you. Samm Tittle.
Yes, sir. First of all, we better start looking at these appointments come from the President of the United States of America for your Supreme Court justices. And that's not saying that you cannot replace them, and they should have term limits as well. You're not going to sit up there from your start to finish and go into your old age and retire when you are a Chief John Roberts and you're allowing what's going on with a Barack Hussein Obama and a Donald John Trump. And I'll give you perfect examples. Gentlemen, I cannot understand how you let this man in this presidency off the hook when we are constitutional advocates. Donald Trump committed treason when he gave secrets to Russian Minister Lavrov at the beginning of his term, and not a thing was done. Not a congressman, not a judge stood up, not a lawyer. I cannot understand how we're letting the devil get away with his due. So the President of the United States of America appoints those judges, and that needs to be looked at now as to whether or not they should stay. Term limits is a real absolute thing that we have got to have in this United States. We're not paying people for breaking the law.
30.
Go ahead and take it, Randy.
Okay. Last but not least on this particular question, Charles Kraut, go ahead.
Okay, I've got a lot of things to say about this. To respond to what Sam just said, since I am probably the only person in this debate who has extensive experience dealing with highly classified materials, I have seen many instances where our government at various levels, not just the president, has provided classified information. In fact, I'm reading a book about it right now, about how the CIA developed a policy of directly sharing with defectors, former KGB agents, former GRU agents, and so on, information which was of a very sensitive nature, but they did it in order to evoke additional information to give these people kind of a lead as to what they were looking for, and it worked. It was very successful. So in terms of committing treason, of course, you can only do that when the nation is at war. So that's not possible. But no, what Trump did was not even illegal. It may have been a very good idea. Now, federal judges, like any judges, can be impeached under the Constitution. I don't see why we don't do more of that, except it's all under the purview of Congress, and it certainly would not happen under the current Congress. There are just a very small number of judges on the federal bench who have been impeached over the history of this country, most of them for alcoholism, falling asleep on the bench, things like that, just rendering themselves or conducting themselves in a way that was not befitting their office. Now, if we have a Democrat in the White House once again, which we will someday, that president can overcome the problem of a very conservative Supreme Court or a Ninth District Court
30.
simply by packing the court, as FDR attempted to do unsuccessfully because he had Congress against it. But that might not be the case the next time around. I would look for advice in appointing judges for places like Hillsdale College,
15.
where I know that their graduates have been taught the classics. They have a very different leaning intellectually and politically and philosophically than the graduates of most universities. I would look for men and women who became lawyers after their 4 years at Hillsdale, for example. I'd also look at specific law schools that teach the Constitution to their prospective constitutional lawyers, because most law schools do not do that today because the Constitution is irrelevant. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody that wants to continue the conversation for 1 minute or have a rebuttal against one of the other candidates, raise your hand. Okay, I see Sam and I see Dan. All right, and the order will be Dan first and then Sam. So go ahead, Dan. Dan?
Although President Trump is way out of line on many, many issues, he's not any more evil as a person than Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, the Kennedy family. We must focus more on issues and less on personalities.
Okay, Sam?
I totally disagree with you, Mr. Cummings. If you don't have the correct personality, the correct upstanding, good, God-fearing, law-abiding citizen in the presidency of the United States of America, you have nothing but a roll down of lawbreakers. And let me just tell you this. When that man turned over those secrets to Lavrov, and then you have the issues with Ukraine, and then you put down your judicial Department of Justice, and you call them all the names you want to call them, you've got a problem in the United States presidency. So
30.
You might want to use the word evil. Other people might want to use the word devil, but I'm going to tell you what you got this election. got either good or bad. You either got God or you've got the devil, Mr. Cummings. And one of these days, we're going to look at our
15.
president and we're going to say, hired.
30-second rebuttal, Dan.
I think that there's nothing more to be said. Principles are more important than personalities.
Principles is right. That's correct. That's correct, sir.
Okay. Well, I guess that resolves that. I guess it's my turn. So let me, one moment, put it on the gallery. I got to do my randomizing. And come on, you can do it. All right.
What's the
So,
question?
I'm gonna get there. Thank you for I probably needed the reminding anyway. All right. So for the final question for tonight, and then we'll be allowing for closing comments. The final question for tonight is, what do you, as a presidential candidate, potential nominee, potential president of these United States, what do you think is the single most important constitutional issue facing this nation, and what will you do about it? Don Grundmann, go ahead.
That's a fantastic spectrum of things which are constitutional difficulties. Quite frankly, well, the most constitutional difficulty, I believe, goes back to the question of war and how we can be manipulated into it by the deep state, which, to reiterate, I would say we need to reopen the 9/11 investigation, because the president can be manipulated and our entire culture can be manipulated into declaring war over circumstances which are entirely fake. Going back to whether it's in another issue, which I believe is of extreme constitutional importance, or importance to our nation, whether it can be tied into the Constitution, is that we have a cultural decline where we actually have our children can be manipulated into what's called transgenderism, which is sweeping through the schools. And the objective that I see behind this all is to destroy our culture, to destroy the very definition of men and women. At the earliest age, if we continue to allow this in our schools, to allow even kindergartners to be taught that it's possible to be a third, fourth, or fifth gender, and also to mutilate themselves into a transgenderism. If you multiply that through years, just look at our in the last since the last presidential election, this attack upon our culture by the LGBT sodomite movement
30
has been a fantastic success. If you project that down the line, if we don't challenge it, then our culture will be destroyed. Our Constitution will be irrelevant, because our people will have not only been dumbed down by public education, but their very souls
15.
and essences will have been destroyed through this indoctrination, which is attacking us now. So our Constitution Party candidate has to stop that by whatever way possible.
All right. Thank you. Don Blankenship.
Yeah, there's so many of them that are so bad you don't know where to go. But I think the biggest problem is that that we're not upholding the laws of the United States. I think the Constitution is the supreme law, and the laws, whether you look at the sanctuary cities or whether you look at many other issues, is such that we're losing the rule of law. And I think a lot of what we've talked about tonight, we've referred to it as Constitution, judicial reform, sanctuary cities, marijuana, whatever. But we've abandoned the rule of law. And if we don't just step up and say, whatever the law is, we might have to allow a little bit of time, but whatever the law is, it's going to be enforced. And I think that alone covers, fortunately, it covers a lot of the things we've talked about and avoids me having to choose one. But the thing I would choose is that we got to return to a nation of laws, and we got to do it as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you. Dan Cummings.
Thank you. In summary, most of our problems can be categorized into two categories. One is the sheer size of our government at all levels. The other is cultural deterioration. They feed upon each other. I will wage a cultural war in favor of traditional morality, and I will, at every opportunity, by maximum attrition, seek to shrink the size of the government. There are many, many targets. I put urgency in it because I understand it will never happen as fast as I want it to. But I will not concede time to it, because by conceding time, it will take even longer. It will always take longer than we plan. So the plans should be short so that something happens within our lifetimes, so that something happens within our generation, and we can present a better situation to our children.
Okay, thank you. Charles Kraut.
Well, I'm in the happy position of being able to say that everything that's been said so far falls into the same category as it is human rights which have created the nanny state, which has created the massive bureaucracies, the wasteful, massive bureaucracies. It has created dependencies. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it when Obama was president, but on whitehouse.gov, you would have found this wonderful slideshow about the life of Julia, explaining exactly why it was so important that everybody in the United States become completely dependent on government at every phase and every age of their lives. This is why we're not upholding the laws of the United States, because human rights say, well, that's not as important as getting what's coming to you. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that everyone on the planet is entitled to free food, free housing, free transportation, free medical care, free clothing, free education, free retirement benefits, free social services, and on and on and on. That has become the law of the land, not only here, but in many countries around the world. And that's why we have changed the laws of the United States. We have created a nation based upon feelings and victimization rather than on the rule of law, responsible citizenship, integrity, morality, and decency. How do we change that? Again, we don't change it overnight, but it has to be changed. And it will be changed as we educate the current generation and the rising generation as to what freedom is all about. The good news is also the bad news, in that we are losing this country and our Constitution so rapidly that, as Dan Cummings says, we have to make changes as quickly as we possibly can. If we don't, and if we don't start immediately,
30.
we do so at our peril. We allow the progressives to increase their momentum in the destruction of this great country. Thank you.
Okay. And Samm Tittle, go ahead.
Okay. I love this. I love the Constitution, and I admire you gentlemen so much. And you of all people, Mr. Cummings, I love you very much because you love your Constitution 60 years. But you know what? That is the law of this land. And we have one law, and we should all abide by it. And that means all of us. Equal rights for all, special privileges for none. We're one of us for all of us. And if we all stay in that Constitution, and we bear down on it, we're going to turn this country right back around. And baby Constitution, when it, she, he, it, they all arrive on November 3rd, we will all get back to the law. And those that belong in the federal penitentiary will be there. Those that should be removed from President of the United States of America shall. And with all that said, you asked the question, what's the most important about that Constitution? The Constitution. It's the law of this land. And that's what puts those stop signs so we don't have all kinds of wrecks and havoc. It's really just that simple. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Well, that's the end of our questions for tonight. We're going to give each of the candidates 1 minute to give their closing statement. So make it quick. And then I'll ask Gary to for his comments. I'll follow up with mine, and that'll be our debate for tonight. Remember, folks, we've got 6 more to go. So looking forward to it. Going to have a great time with all this, as you can tell. So my randomizer has Charles Kraut coming up first. Go ahead. 1 minute for a closing statement.
Thank you. Thank you for participating in this debate. I believe in America's potential. I love this country. I have served my country in the United States Army for 4 years in a very sensitive assignment behind the Iron Curtain. Our Constitution made possible the greatest, freest nation in the history of mankind. Our founding fathers left it up to us to decide whether we would be grateful for the blessings of freedom and work to preserve and protect them, or whether we would succumb to human nature and allow freedom to fail through our apathy and indifference. I am certain that there is still time to regain our freedoms if, and only if, we work together to save our constitutional republic. For this to happen, all Americans must become better educated in the principles embodied both in the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, as well as those underlying those documents, which we have talked about this evening. We must rediscover our faith in God. We must become a nation of honest, moral, and upright citizens who willingly fulfill their obligation to our families, our communities, and our nations. We must become worthy of citizenship in this great republic.
Okay.
You and I are in a unique position in the history of mankind. We can continue to witness the demise of the finest government the world has ever seen, or we can become responsible citizens doing our best to accomplish a magnificent goal.
Okay, time. Don Grundmann.
I ask for the support of everyone who's listening for my campaign to seek the nomination of the Constitution Party, because I believe that the Constitution Party is the last political party which can stand for many of the principles, the whole spectrum of principles that we've discussed so far, of on getting back to an honest currency by whatever means, stopping foreign wars which are undeclared, reining in the power of the federal government, stopping its size and how it stomps on the rights of people through judiciary actions and just taxation issues. There's a fantastic amount of out of control government that only we can do, only we will stand up for, and we will be the only party which will stand up against the social engineering, which is destroying our culture. We're the last party which will stand against the sodomite movement in its attempts to destroy our children. We're the last party which will stand for all these wonderful things which form the foundation of our nation. So I ask our listeners to join our Constitution Party. Come and join us in the state chapters. We're the last party which will do this. We aren't going to be socially engineered to shut up like the other parties or make allowances which will allow all the corruption to occur in our country, like I would say the Libertarian parties and the Green, in addition to the Republicans and Democrats. We are the last party standing to stand for principle.
All right, thank you. Don Blankenship. 1 minute.
I think the key thing I'd like to leave us with is that, you know, we have the laws and we have the Constitution. Our problem is execution, and actually we enforce the laws better than most countries do against our citizens. You know, if you think about traffic in other countries, particularly in places like Egypt and so forth, they don't comply with the traffic laws at all. But in this country, we sort of come close to maintaining fairly good control over stop signs and stoplights. But the elite, which I consider to be the government officials, whether they be the judges or whether they be Congress or whether they be people of high stature in other regards, don't comply with the laws. And so at the end of the day, we have to find a way to enforce the Constitution and the laws of the land against the people in the government. The government is itself, and that means the government employees and the government managers are not complying with the law. And that is the central question. How are we going to make them comply with the law?
All right, thank you. Samm Tittle.
Thank you for the opportunity. Ladies and here in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and I'm here to get the nomination for the Constitution Party. It's going to happen on March 10th, 2020. This Tuesday, you can join me over at the pizza party that we're having so that you can feel good about getting your Constitution back. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for it now. I found myself in the middle of a Hispanic culture right here in Idaho. Quiero decir que quiero sus votos y lo quiero próximo Vamos adelante. We're going to get this country back on target. And when you're here legally, you're here with us. You assimilate, you go through the law. But here in the United States of America, we have the Constitution of the United States of America. I'm Samm Tittle. You'll find me at Samm 2020. I approve this message. Thank you.
All right, Dan Cummings.
Thank you for the closing. I am constitutionally experienced. I'm a lifelong constitutional scholar. I understand the problems in the government and in the culture. I understand the momentum that's against us and the inertia that we face that's a problem. I understand the right priorities of where to attack first and where to follow up. And I believe that my constitutional instincts are as good as anybody I'm aware of. Please, I want your support while I support the country. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, every candidate that is here tonight. Gary, final, as I always say, final rounds to fire, but final comments for tonight.
I want to thank all the candidates for coming on. My own personal experience, each and every one of you informed me of something that I did not know. I appreciate that. You taught me tonight. The other side of that was each and every one of you gave me something to ponder where I might have had a different opinion, but because of what you said, I'm now maybe reconsidering my viewpoint on that. So thank you very much for that enlightenment. For anyone that is not of the Constitution Party that might be watching this, I just like for you to contrast what was said here tonight regarding constitutional issues versus all of the candidates from the major parties out there and even the other third parties about what they say about these kinds of issues. I think the contrast is just really great. You can absolutely see the difference between those candidates who are constitutional based and that love the Constitution and know what it means versus those that have no clue.
All right. Thank you, Gary. Folks, I got to tell you, I'm incredibly honored to be host of this great debate. We could certainly explore so many more issues, specifically kind of focused on the Constitution and the laws of these United States of America. But obviously, we don't have that much time. So we kind of hit some, what I believe are really crucially important issues on the topic of the Constitution. Our next debate next week, next Friday at 7:30 sharp, it'll be the foreign policy debate. And so you'll not want to miss that to find out what is our policy and is it good? Is it bad? How will our candidates really focus on these issues? Because as the leader of the free world has been, said many times from many people, these candidates, if they become the president, are going to be significantly involved in shaping the foreign policy of this country in a global environment for the duration of their not candidacy, but presidency. Thank you, candidates, for being here. We are so honored to have you here. And by the way, once we finish, please stay on for a few minutes once we close the live feed so that we can talk a little bit about things. Hopefully we make it better. Folks, we're going to hopefully fix the technical situation. This is the first time that we've ever used YouTube Live. And I think in using this resource, it went very well. We're hoping that we can work with the candidates to make sure that their video feeds are a little better. We don't lose their video feeds and that sort of stuff. Let's see. I got one more note. Oh, yeah. And I want to echo something that Gary had said. It's kind of interesting. Notice that we didn't have a whole lot of rebuttal. We did have a lot of, following on kind of trying to clarify the stance, but not a whole lot of, it's interesting when you have a concept of the Constitution and you're talking with others who have a concept of the Constitution. It's kind of hard to debate when you're all on the right side of the issue. So I just want to re-echo what Gary had said, that, compare that to the free and equal debates where there was such a great disparity. Now, some of you might say, well, that was good entertainment. Well, if that's what you're into, be entertained. But if you want to find out the right way, the constitutional way, and the position where we have candidates, regardless of which one of these candidates make it, will put this country headed down the right path once again. Folks, we're going to stick with the YouTube live, and we will, I think there's a way to pre-post the link to this live video. I saw it happen with the free and equal debates. I haven't used this resource before, but we are going to start taking advantage of that. So stand by. We'll keep everyone informed of how they can see this live debate. And when you see it live, you're going to see that you have the opportunities to communicate in the chat form of the video that's going on. We had an opportunity to have a couple people ask questions. I've responded. We're going to try to use that resource a little better. So that's all the time we got for tonight. I, again, appreciate everyone. I appreciate those who viewed, and ask God's blessing upon all of us as we work to restore this Constitution, or this country, back to the chains of the Constitution. May God bless you, and may God bless these United States of America once again. Good night, everyone. And please, candidates, stay with us.
Good night, folks.